My mother-in-law called my husband's ex the daughter she never had. I gave her an ultimatum. And if you told me 2 years ago that I'd be saying that, I would have laughed. Because when I married Ethan, I thought I was getting a sweet, slightly awkward husband and a perfectly normal, if a little overbearing, mother-in-law. I had no idea I was signing up for a never-ending family drama starring his ex-girlfriend. Ethan is the kindest man I've ever met. He's an engineer, quiet and thoughtful, with a smile that could melt glaciers. We met at a coffee shop, bonded over a shared love for obscure indie bands, and fell in love quickly, easily. Our relationship was a calm harbor after years of choppy waters for both of us. He was everything I never knew I needed. His mother, Janet, on the other hand, was a force of nature. She's a whirlwind of opinions, unsolicited advice, and a fierce, almost suffocating, love for her son. When Ethan told her he was engaged, she was ecstatic. For about a week. Then the Hannah comments started. Hannah was Ethan's college girlfriend. They dated for 3 years, and by all accounts, she was a lovely person. But they broke up amicably, years before I even met Ethan. So, when Janet started dropping her name into every conversation, it felt odd. Oh, Hannah would have loved this wedding dress, she'd say, holding up a picture of a gown I'd just tried on. Or, Hannah always said Ethan looked so handsome in a tuxedo. I'd just smile and nod, trying to be the polite, understanding fiancé. I figured it was just a mother's nostalgia. A harmless quirk. Everyone has an awkward mother-in-law phase, right? I was determined to be the bigger person. To show her I was worthy of her son. The comments escalated. When we were picking out our wedding cake, Janet sighed dramatically. Hannah always loved red velvet. She had such exquisite taste. I chose vanilla bean. During our wedding planning, it felt like Hannah was an invisible guest. A ghost hovering over every decision. Janet would compare my choices to what Hannah would have done. Or what Hannah always dreamed of. Ethan, bless his heart, would try to intervene. Mom, Sophie's choices are her own. Hannah isn't part of this. But Janet would just wave him off with a dismissive hand. Oh, you know what I mean, dear. Just reminiscing. I tried to talk to Ethan about it. Does your mom really like Hannah that much? He'd sigh. Mom just gets attached. Hannah was around for a long time. She'll get over it. I wanted to believe him. I really did. Our wedding day was beautiful. Despite the underlying tension, Janet managed to get through the ceremony without mentioning Hannah, a small miracle in itself. I walked down the aisle, saw Ethan's beaming face, and felt like I was finally stepping into my own happy ending. I pushed all the Hannah comments to the back of my mind, convinced that once I was officially his wife, Janet would finally accept me. I was wrong. The first family dinner after the wedding was supposed to be a celebration. Ethan and I had just returned from our honeymoon, still basking in that newlywed glow. We hosted it at our new home. A cozy little place we'd poured our hearts into decorating. I spent all day cooking, setting the table with our new wedding china, excited to finally feel like the true matriarch of our little family unit. The doorbell rang. Ethan went to answer it, expecting his parents and his sister. But when he opened the door, his face went slack. And there stood Hannah. She was holding a casserole dish, a bright, confident smile on her face, looking perfectly at home. Janet, who was right behind her, clapped her hands together, beaming. Surprise! I invited Hannah. She's practically family, you know. I just couldn't imagine a family dinner without her. My heart sank. The newlywed glow vanished, replaced by a cold dread. I forced a smile, tight enough to crack a tooth, and managed to say, Of course, Hannah. Please, come in. Ethan, bless his conflict-averse heart, just stood there, mouth slightly agape. He looked from his mother to me, then to Hannah. A deer caught in headlights. The dinner was a blur of forced pleasantries and thinly veiled jabs. Janet spent the entire evening fawning over Hannah, asking about her new job, her dating life, even reminiscing about the good old days when she and Ethan were together. She'd make comments like, Hannah always knew how to make Ethan laugh. Or, remember that time, Hannah, when you and Ethan? I sat there, picking at my food, feeling like an intruder in my own home. At my own family dinner. Ethan tried to steer the conversation, but Janet was relentless. Hannah, to her credit, seemed genuinely uncomfortable at times, but she never left. When the evening finally ended, and Hannah and Janet had left, I turned to Ethan, my voice trembling. What was that, Ethan? What just happened? He ran a hand through his hair, looking exhausted. I don't know, Sophie. I told Mom not to. I swear. But she did anyway, I said, the anger finally bubbling to the surface. And you just let it happen. You let her bring your ex-girlfriend to our first family dinner as a married couple. He pulled me into a hug. I'm sorry, babe. I'll talk to her. I promise. I wanted to believe him, I really did. But a cold, hard knot of dread had formed in my stomach. This wasn't just a harmless quirk anymore. This was a pattern. And I had a terrible feeling it was just the beginning. It's strange how one night can change how you see everything. After that dinner, nothing about family time felt safe anymore. Janet texted 2 days later, acting like nothing had happened. So lovely seeing you both. Hannah's dessert was amazing, wasn't it? Thinking of having her bring it again next week. I stared at the message until my chest burned. I typed out 5 different replies before deleting all of them and putting the phone face down. Ethan walked in, coffee mug in hand, half awake. She texted again? He asked. She wants to bring Hannah to our next dinner, I said flatly. He sighed, that heavy, resigned kind that always made me feel like the villain for being upset. I'll talk to her. Like last time? I asked. He looked away. She doesn't listen to me, Soph. You know how she is. I set the mug down a little too hard. Then maybe it's time she learns. The next week, we visited Janet's home. Her walls were covered in year-by-year family photos. Ethan as a kid, his graduations, vacations, holidays. As I scanned the frames, a familiar smile caught my eye. Hannah's, front and center in a Christmas photo, arms around Janet and Ethan, as if she were still part of the family. My heart clenched. That picture wasn't there before. Janet noticed me looking. Oh, that one? I found it in an old album. Such sweet memories, she said with a wistful sigh, brushing imaginary dust off the frame. Hannah's practically part of us, you know? Ethan's shoulders tensed. Mom, maybe. She cut him off. Oh, don't be silly. You two are happy, right? There's room for everyone. That was the moment it clicked she wasn't clueless. She enjoyed this. Keeping Hannah close gave her control and me humiliation. We made it through the visit. Every conversation was coded with passive aggressiveness disguised as politeness. When she wasn't comparing me to Hannah, she was praising Hannah's maturity and grace. At one point, she smiled sweetly and said, Sophie, dear, I hope you don't mind, but Hannah and I are going dress shopping tomorrow. My chest tightened. Wedding dress shopping? No, she laughed, waving her hand. Just for fun. She wanted my advice. We always had such a lovely mother-daughter bond. Isn't that right, Ethan? He froze, unsure what to say. Janet could twist silence into guilt better than anyone I've ever met. On the way home, I didn't speak. Neither did he. The car filled with unspoken words too sharp to touch. Once home, I went straight to the bedroom and shut the door. A few minutes later, Ethan knocked softly. Can I come in? I didn't answer. He stepped in anyway. Look, I know how this looks, but... No, you don't, I said, turning to face him. You don't see what she's doing because you don't want to see it. He rubbed his face. It's complicated. She's lonely, Soph. She lost Dad. And Hannah was... She lost Dad 7 years ago. I snapped. And I lost count of how many times she's disrespected me since we got married. I could see the guilt crawl up his neck. But guilt didn't fix anything. By the next month, every family occasion felt like a test. Birthday dinners? Hannah. Barbecues? Hannah. Sunday lunch? Reserved seat, you guessed it. Janet even started referring to her as my girl. Once, she said it in front of me. Oh, my girl Hannah just got promoted. She beamed, before realizing the silence that followed. Oh, and of course Sophie's doing well too. I smiled a professional smile that didn't reach my eyes. Congrats to my girl Hannah, I said flatly, and sipped my drink. Even Ethan couldn't defend it anymore. That night he finally admitted. It's getting out of hand. I looked at him, thankful but still angry. Then do something. He nodded. And he did try. The next day, he visited her without me. Came back pale and quiet. She says she doesn't mean to upset you, he murmured. She just misses Hannah. Says she was like family. So, what did you tell her? That you're my wife and she should respect that. And? He hesitated. She said she does respect you. But she doesn't see why you can't all coexist. Coexist? I repeated. Like I'm sharing custody of you with your ex? Weeks later, another invite came, this time for Thanksgiving. Daniel and I debated if we should even go. He wanted to keep the peace. I wanted to keep my sanity. In the end, I chose diplomacy one last time. Big mistake. Janet greeted us at the door like nothing was wrong. The house smelled like cinnamon and roast turkey, cozy and deceptive. And then, there she was, Hannah, plating mashed potatoes like she lived there, wearing an apron embroidered with, "World's Best Daughter." I felt everything inside me go cold. Janet, I said quietly. Why is Hannah here? She blinked innocently. Oh, don't start. She helped me cook. You should be thanking her. Ethan tried to intervene, but I raised my hand. It's fine. I sat through dinner with my stomach twisting. Hannah chatted politely, clearly sensing the tension. Janet's eyes darted back and forth, feeding off it like fuel. When dessert came, Janet lifted her glass. To family old and new. Blood or bond, once family, always family. It was the last straw. That night, when we got home, I didn't even take off my shoes. I turned to Ethan. She does this again. I'm done pretending. Next time, I deal with her myself. He nodded slowly. I'll back you. I hope so, I said. Because when I do, it won't be pretty. If anger were a temperature, mine had finally reached a quiet boil. Every visit, every family dinner after Thanksgiving, felt less like tradition and more like a silent challenge. How long could Janet push me before I snapped? Ethan suggested we skip a few gatherings to cool things down. I agreed, but his mother didn't. The texts kept coming. Miss you both. Having Hannah over this weekend, would love to see you too. When family grows, love multiplies. I stopped replying. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. 1,000 unsent messages sitting like ghosts in my drafts. Ethan tried to balance both worlds, frantic. Loyal son at noon. Silent, guilty husband by night. Every argument ended with the same plea. Can't we just keep the peace? One night, I finally said it. Peace for who, Ethan? Because it's sure not for me. He didn't answer. And that hurt more than all the dinners combined. We spent days avoiding the topic. He'd watch TV. Volume too loud. I'd scroll through recipes I didn't plan to cook. The silence grew teeth, gnawing at whatever was left of our warmth. Finally, one Saturday morning, I packed a small overnight bag and drove to my friend Riley's. I needed space, not from Ethan, but from the version of myself constantly shrinking around other people's comfort. Riley listened without interrupting. When I finished, she just said, "Boundaries aren't disrespect, Soph. They're instructions for how to love you." That stuck. I drove home late, replaying her words in my head. Ethan was waiting, awake, guilt carved into every part of him. "I told Mom no more dinners for now," he whispered when I walked in. "I should have said it months ago." I stared at him, searching his eyes for hesitation. There wasn't any. For the first time, I saw the man I married, the one brave enough to stand beside me, not between me and his mother. A week of calm followed. I started to believe maybe we'd turned a corner. Then came Sunday. Janet showed up unannounced. I opened the door expecting maybe a peace talk, but she wasn't alone. Hannah stood behind her, arms full of flowers, avoiding eye contact. "Surprise," Janet said brightly. "We wanted to drop off something sweet for you two. Isn't that thoughtful?" I felt my pulse hammering in my ears. Ethan arrived behind me. His voice was flat. "Mom, we talked about this." Janet frowned. "Don't be rude." She just wanted to say hello. I looked at Hannah, polite, embarrassed, still playing along. "Thanks for the flowers," I said evenly. "You can leave them by the door." Janet gasped. "Sophie, that's no way to treat a friend." I smiled coldly. "You mean your friend, not mine." I shut the door softly, not slamming just enough to make the message land. Ethan exhaled beside me. "That was, wow, necessary," I said. And it felt like breathing after months underwater. That night was the first time Ethan fully defended me out loud. He called her. I didn't ask what he said, but afterward, his phone stayed silent for the rest of the evening. Later, as we sat on the couch in comfortable quiet, he took my hand. "You were right," he said. "Silence just made her stronger. I'm done appeasing her." I nodded, finally unclenching. We needed to show her this marriage has two voices, not one. "Would you keep trying diplomacy, or draw the line once and for all?" Weeks passed. No unexpected visits. No calls. No dinners. I started sleeping through the night again. Then one evening, I found Ethan sitting alone, scrolling through old family pictures on his phone. "Gonna send her one?" I teased. He shook his head. "She'll never stop testing the limits. Will she?" "No," I said quietly. "But she'll learn I'm not easy to replace." We sat there for a while. The kind of silence that didn't ache anymore. Then the text popped up from Janet. "Dinner for your anniversary. Thought we could start fresh. Promise, just family. Love, Mom." I looked at Ethan. He looked at me. "I don't trust her," I said. He nodded. "I'll handle it." He typed quickly. "We'll come if it's just family. No surprises, Mom." Her reply came instantly. "Of course, sweetheart." I wasn't convinced. That Friday, I helped him pick an outfit, did my makeup, smiled for the mirror like someone preparing for battle rather than dinner. If she tried one more stunt, I promised myself I would end the game right there. Ever reached that point where you're done keeping the peace? Type enough if you know that feeling. Our anniversary dinner was supposed to mark a year of peace. Progress, a new start. Instead, it became the night my patience finally shattered. Ethan's mother, Janet, had invited both families for what she called a quiet night of love and forgiveness. I almost believed her. Almost. The evening began, fine candles, calm music, polite conversation. I breathed easier as the first course arrived. Maybe, I thought, she meant it this time. Maybe I'd get through one dinner without feeling like a secondary character in my own marriage. Then the doorbell rang. Janet jumped up, smiling too wide. "Oh, that must be my surprise." Ethan froze mid-sentence. My fork clattered onto my plate. "No. Please, no." She opened the door. And there she was. Hannah. Carrying a bouquet, nervously smiling, like someone lured into a trap she couldn't see. "Happy anniversary," she chirped. "Janet invited me," she said. "You'd love the company." My chest went tight. Janet clasped her hands dramatically. "I thought it would be nice. You two share so many good memories. Why dwell on boundaries when we can celebrate family?" Every sound in the room disappeared. Forks. Chatter. Even Ethan's breathing. In that moment, something in me moved from hurt to pure, quiet clarity. I stood. "Excuse me," I said softly, and walked into the kitchen. Ethan followed seconds later. "Don't," he whispered. "Not tonight." I turned to face him. "If not tonight, when? If she doesn't stop here, she never will." I pulled out my phone and texted him one single line. "Either you tell her she's crossed the line, or I will." He stared, torn between son and husband. Then he whispered, "Do what you need to do." I walked back into the dining room, calm as glass. Janet looked almost amused when I reappeared. "Come back to join the fun, dear." I met her eyes. "No. I came to end it." The room went still. "End what?" she asked, faux innocence coating every syllable. "This cycle," I said. "The constant disrespect." Hannah's smile faded. Ethan sat frozen. "I've tried kindness. I've tried ignoring it. But this," I gestured toward Hannah. "This is cruelty wrapped in tradition. And it ends tonight." Janet blinked. "You're overreacting." I stepped closer, voice low but steady. "You keep inviting my husband's ex into our lives and calling her the daughter you never had. I'm your daughter-in-law, Janet. Whether you like it or not." Her expression hardened. "Don't put words in my mouth." "I don't need to," I said. "You've repeated them enough yourself. Be honest, would you have stayed calm at this point or finally said everything out loud?" Janet's voice rose. "You're trying to steal my son." I almost laughed. "No, Janet. You're trying to keep him 18 forever. You can't let him grow up, so you keep surrounding yourself with the version of him that loved Hannah. That's not love. It's control. Tears sprang to her eyes, but not sorrow, defiance. You're cruel. Hannah pushed her chair back slowly. Maybe I should go, she murmured. But I shook my head gently. You're not the problem, Hannah. You're just the prop. She looked stunned, then stood and left quietly, murmuring an apology as she passed Ethan. The silence that followed was the kind that rewires families. Finally, Ethan spoke calm. Sure. Mom, Sophie's right. She turned on him. Don't tell me. But he didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. You've heard her. Over and over. If it happens again, we're gone. That's our boundary. Janet stared at him, realizing maybe for the first time that he wasn't her boy anymore. He was a man. A husband. Choosing his life over her comfort zone. No one moved. Only the clink of a wine glass settling back onto the table. Then she whispered, You'd walk away from me? He nodded once. If you keep disrespecting my wife, yes. She burst into tears. Sobs messy and unrestrained. I wanted to pity her, but exhaustion had dried that well. I simply said, We'll give you time. Ethan took my hand. We left the house together, no dramatic exit. No slammed door. Just quiet footsteps. A long drive home. Headlights cutting through soft rain. In the car. Neither of us spoke for a while. The tension melted into something fragile release. That was brutal, Ethan muttered finally. Necessary, I said. Maybe she'll finally understand. He nodded, eyes on the road. Even if she doesn't, I do. Have you ever had to choose between keeping peace and keeping respect? Which did you pick? When we got home, I peeled off my heels, tossed them by the door, and just breathed deep, unrestrained, honest air for the first time in months. Ethan wrapped his arms around me. You know what I realized tonight? He whispered. You weren't giving my mom an ultimatum. You were giving us a chance. I smiled into his chest. Then let's make sure we don't waste it. The house was still vibrating with everything that had been said the night before. I woke up before Ethan, sat at the kitchen table with my coffee, and listened to the silence. For the first time in months, it didn't hurt. No calls. No texts. No pictures of Hannah showing up on social media. Just silence. Which, in its own way, felt like peace. I thought it would bring relief right away. It didn't. At first, the quiet felt too heavy, like the aftermath of an explosion when you realize you're still standing, but everything around you has shifted slightly out of place. Ethan stumbled in, hair messy, still half asleep. Morning, he mumbled. Morning, I said softly. He grabbed a mug, sat across from me, and stared at his coffee. Do you think I was too harsh? He finally asked. No, I said. You were honest. There's a difference. He nodded, but his eyes were far away. I could tell he was thinking about her, his mother crying at the table, and the little boy inside him still trying to make it all okay. Have you ever stood up for yourself but still felt guilty afterward? The following week passed in strange quiet. We went to work, cooked, laughed again. Life felt normal, but we both kept glancing at our phones, half expecting the inevitable message. It came 8 days later. Dinner Sunday. Just family. I'd like to apologize. Ethan read it out loud. His shoulders relaxed just a little. Do we go? I asked. He nodded. We have to. Even if it's awkward. Sunday evening. Janet answered the door herself. No decorations, no extra chairs. Hannah wasn't there. Just a small table set for 4, Janet, her sister, Ethan and me. She looked older somehow. Like pride had finally weighed her down enough to leave lines it couldn't hide. Come in, she said quietly. Dinner was clumsy. She over-apologized for everything, the soup being cold, the bread too firm. Small talk crackled in the air like bad radio static. Halfway through, Ethan broke the tension. Mom, he said gently. You don't have to pretend everything's fine. Just talk. Janet's eyes filled fast. I just wanted to feel needed again, she said, voice trembling. When Hannah left Ethan, she still called me, sent me cards. I didn't realize how much I'd started depending on that until it was gone. She looked at me. And then you came along. And I was happy for him, Sophie. Truly. I just didn't know how to be part of his life without clinging to the pieces that were still mine. I didn't expect honesty. I just sat there, absorbing it. I never wanted him to choose, she said. I only wanted to still matter. I met her eyes. You do matter. But what's the point of mattering if you're the reason someone else feels small? She put her napkin down, hands shaking. I know. And I'm sorry. For a moment no one spoke. Then Ethan reached across the table, covered her hand with his. Mom, we want you in our lives. But we also need space to live ours. That did it. She broke down. Real tears this time. Not the performative kind. And for the first time, I saw the woman behind the control, lonely, terrified, human. Could you forgive someone who finally admits they hurt you even if it took too long? We stayed another hour, mostly listening. She apologized again before we left, hugging me longer than she ever had before. On the drive home, Ethan exhaled deeply. That was hopeful, he said. Yeah, I nodded. It felt real. When we got home, he scrolled through photos on his phone again. There was one from a year ago, our wedding photo. Janet behind us, smiling proudly. It hit different now. Maybe we'll take a new one soon, he said. I smiled. Maybe we will. Over the next months, things actually did change. No unexpected calls. No surprise guests. Occasional awkward dinners, but without the poison hiding under small talk. Janet started therapy. Ethan told me one night over tea. Half smiling. She said she's working on boundaries. He said. That's progress. I replied. I didn't rush to trust it entirely. But each gesture felt like one brick added back to a bridge I'd stopped believing in. A few months later, she handed me a small envelope on my birthday. Inside was a simple note that read, "Thank you for protecting my son. And for letting me start again. Do you believe people really change, or just learn not to repeat the same mistake?" As we drove home that night, sunset melting between the trees, Ethan reached across and squeezed my hand. "You changed everything by speaking up," he said. I smiled. "No. We did." And for the first time in a very long time, I realized silence could mean peace, not avoidance. It just needed honesty to make it clean again. A full year has passed since that night. The night everything finally cracked open and, strangely enough, began to heal. The silence that once felt heavy now moves like air between us, soft, breathable, real. Janet still comes around. It's different now. She brings pie instead of opinions, conversations instead of comparisons. When she walks through the door, my heart doesn't race anymore. Ethan joked the other day. "Look at us operating like a normal family." I laughed. Because for the first time, it's kind of true. It's not that everything magically became perfect. Boundaries still wobble, feelings still bruise, but there's been progress. And progress, I've learned, is sometimes better than apology. Janet still slips occasionally, saying things like, "Oh, Hannah used to bake the best cinnamon rolls." But now she stops herself. You can see it in her face, the self-correction, the growth. And I let it go. Because acknowledging that change sometimes deserves as much grace as demanding it. A few months ago, she handed me an envelope with shaking hands. Inside was an old photo Ethan and me at our wedding, sunlight beaming over us. On the back she'd written, "Thank you for loving my son in the way that frees him, not binds him." It's strange, the peace I wanted so badly didn't come from winning an argument, or forcing someone to see things my way. It came from standing my ground with love still in my heart. I used to think silence meant weakness, that being the bigger person just meant swallowing pain. But now I know silence only hurts when it's filled with resentment. When it's chosen out of peace, it can heal everything. Have you ever learned that real peace isn't quiet, it's just finally safe? On our second anniversary, Janet surprised us with dinner at her own home. No fanfare, no surprises. Just family. She even joked, "No secret guests this time." It felt light, easy, like the past had been acknowledged and gently put down. At one point during dessert, she pulled me aside. "I really did think of Hannah like a daughter," she admitted. "But I was wrong to compare. She represented a part of my son's life I missed, not what he needed now." Then she smiled. "Now I see the woman who gives him calm." And for the first time, I hugged her without hesitation. After everything, we both walked away from that night understanding the same thing. Family doesn't mean possession. It means presence. And presence, like love, only works when it's offered freely. Ethan squeezed my hand on the drive home. "Mom told me you changed her," he said. I smiled. "She changed herself. I just stopped making it easy for her to ignore the truth." He laughed softly. "Well, that's kind of your superpower. What would you say your real-life superpower is when it comes to dealing with family drama?" I've started writing down little lessons this whole saga taught me, not for a book, but for myself, for the days when life feels loud and impossible again. Love speaks louder when it respects silence. Boundaries don't divide families, they define them. You can forgive someone without reopening the door. And maybe the hardest truth of all, sometimes the family you fight hardest to protect includes the ones you didn't know how to love until you said no. Now, every time I walk into Janet's house, and the same sunlight hits the picture frames, all of us together, laughing, I realize peace isn't something that's given. It's built. Word by word. Choice by choice. Even ultimatum by ultimatum. And I know one thing for sure. If I could go back, I wouldn't do anything differently. Because love doesn't survive through silence, it survives through truth. If you watch till the end, drop in the comments not for silence but for peace.